Let's continue going around the table. So would you date a guy who's not a feminist?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
I don't think I would.
You wouldn't. Okay, what about you?
Could you go explain what a feminist is?
Well, I mean, didn't you describe yourself as a feminist?
Could you explain it a little?
Well, okay, so that I would argue that the most charitable at least the most charitable definition I would give feminism is it's a woman's advocacy movement.
Mm-hmm.
That's the most charitable definition I give it. I don't even believe it's in the most charitable form. It's a movement for equality. I think it's a woman's advocacy movement.
Yes.
There's nothing wrong with that. I don't think it has any interest in equality, though.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it's
Okay.
women's advocacy.
Both of you guys.
The reality, but that's me being charitable. I would argue the reality of feminism is it's something along the lines of women's advocacy steeped in conspiracy theories, and there's bare minimum like some degree of male bigotry, bias, even misandry, hatred of men. Yeah, that's my more accurate sense of what feminism is.
Okay. Can I change my answer? I don't think that I'm a feminist.
Oh, okay.
Good job.
I'm noticing a pattern. Are you noticing a pattern? They all say they're a feminist, and then when we further define, they're like, "No, I don't want to identify with that," right? But then when we get probing questions going, we kind of find out that they are feminists. So.
Let me ask a couple questions that could perhaps help with this. So, you've got a boyfriend over here.
I do.
With him, or just like if you were ever to, go back out there and date, who do you think should pay on a first date? The man or the woman?
Like the very first date?
Yeah, first date.
I mean, I guess if he's taking you out, then he
Then-
could pay for it.
then
But
the guy.
like throughout the relationship, I feel like it shouldn't just be him.
Okay, so first date should be the guy. What about the first few dates?
I would split. I would offer, like when we were first starting to date, I would like, if he pays for the dinner, then maybe I'll get dessert. Or, like,
Okay, so we would pay for 80% and you would pay for 20% of the bill? Typically, if my understanding of eating out, dessert is typically going to be a fraction of maybe it's $5.
Or, like, it doesn't have to be like dinner and dessert. It could be like, if we're going to the movies, then he could buy the tickets, or then I'll get the snacks.
With your boyfriend for the first date, did he pay for it?
I'm pretty sure he got the tickets and I got the snacks.
Okay. What about you? If you end up on a first date with a guy, would you like him to pay, or are you okay 50-50?
I'm okay with 50-50 for like the first date, yeah.
What about dates beyond the first date?
I think it would be like, it shouldn't have to be like exactly 50-50, but I'm okay with like, if we're like more serious about it, like, we just kind of like pay for each other, and it's not like something like super like strict, I guess, like.
Okay, he gets one, you get one.
Yeah, kind of
okay.
like that.
What about you?
Absolutely.
Absolutely what?
Pay on the first date.
The guy should pay on the first date?
Yes.
Okay. What about you?
Yes, the guy should pay on the first date.
The guy should pay on the first date.
I don't think so. I mean, look, if they're asking for, they're like, I want to take you to a super expensive restaurant. I don't have the money for that. I'm going to communicate that. And if they're like, okay, then let's go somewhere cheaper, cool. That's fine with me. I don't care.
Okay.
But I will split.
That's fair. Okay,
Yeah.
so if he's asking you somewhere expensive, then yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. What about you? Who should pay?
Men.
Men should pay. Okay. Didn't you say you were a feminist? Feminist. Not a
said
feminist.
50-50.
Hey,
Not
I
a
said
feminist.
split.
Feminist.
50-50.
Okay.
Well, I mean, split.
Here's another question that we can kind
No,
of figure out here. Should women be drafted? This is in
to the
efforts
military?
to figure out if you
Yes.
guys are feminist or not. Should women be drafted in the military?
Like, by drafted, do you mean like when you turn 18, like you're automatically?
Okay, yeah, so
drafted?
men have to register for the selective service. Currently, there's not a draft in the United States, but all men in the United States at 18, in order to be able to vote and have other benefits, they have to register for the selective service, which would then make them subject to military conscription in the case that there was a military conflict, which required a draft. So do you think women should be subject to selective service draft? Forced?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. Okay.
I wouldn't even trust women to like fight for our country unless that's like that's their thing. You know, like if you're like that type of woman that you feel like you're stronger and stuff like that. But I just feel like no.
Okay. What do you think?
Well, hold on. So you think they should be drafted based on how they feel?
No,
About-
I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying if like willingly, if you just want to.
She's saying if they want to
No,
volunteer.
just really
Not a
want to
draft,
volunteer.
though.
Yeah,
If
yeah.
they want to volunteer, yes.
Yeah, but then that just defeats
Which
the
is-
purpose.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, that's what we currently have.
yeah, but I guess we should be drafted because I mean,
Okay. All right.
I mean, plenty of men don't want to join.
okay.
Plenty of men, plenty of men, plenty of women. Doesn't matter.
Okay.
If we gotta do what we gotta do, I mean, yeah.
Now, here's the interesting thing. You guys both have different opinions on this. I still don't know which is actually like the actual feminist position, because we'll have feminists who will argue it's actually, we had one last week with Andrew,
Yeah.
who said, well, it's not equitable. It's not equity for women to be drafted. That's a whole nother thing.
Interesting.
But what about you?
No.
No? Okay.
No, women should not be drafted.
Should not be drafted,
No.
but they should be paid equally in sporting events.
No comment.
Okay.
No.
They shouldn't be drafted?
I don't think so.
Well, hold on.
Okay, so everybody except Anza
Yeah.
said women shouldn't be drafted, but y'all want to be equal? So wait a sec. How are you equal if the men are the ones that have to fight and die to defend the country? The men are the ones that build and maintain all the infrastructure, right? Like none of this stuff in the studio is built or maintained by women. Do you know that like 90% of infrastructure jobs are still held by men? And that if you look at the top 20 jobs held by women now in 2024 versus 1924 are almost the exact same. So women have had 100 years to do whatever they want, and they still do the same 20 jobs they did 100 years ago, other than we switched out farm labor for HR work. But other than that, we're secretaries, nurses, daycare ladies, early childhood education, administrative assistants, retail workers, all the same shit that we were a century ago. So if the men are the ones tasked with every time there's a natural disaster, they have to go out and rescue people from the fires and the floodwaters, and every time there's a war, the men have to go and fight it and defend the country, and anytime there's a criminal who needs to be violently arrested, it's going to be a man who goes and does that, not a woman. Where does the equality come in? If we're doing the fluffy jobs, you know, we're all singers. We got a lot of singers and musicians, which is cool. It's great. I love music too. But y'all ain't like rescuing people and you know, doing the heavy lifting or the dirty or the dangerous jobs. Like who collects the trash? Men. You know, who does all the steel working and oil rig work and all of the like sewer cleaning?
Heli
Men.
tower making.
We have a video on this, Rachel, actually. Nick, remember that video we were looking at yesterday? I think it might still be on one of the tabs. Let's watch this. No audio. No audio. Go ahead.
Oh, there's no audio.
Yeah, go ahead. Are you ready to work on an oil rig? All right.
Come on, feminists, get in there. You
those
can
are
do
some
it.
roughnecks.
Come on,
That's
ladies. Anyone?
definitely not strong
Andrew had to
enough for
do
that.
stuff like that back in the day. They'd lower him
Underwater
into little,
welding, I
not
guess.
not
Or-
underwater, but they would lower him into these tiny little horrifically frightening spaces to do extremely dangerous stuff.
I'm claustrophobic.
I really feel like
Yeah.
women should just have the choice to do it if they want to, because I know some women that can handle it.
They do have the
Yeah.
choice, and they're
That's-
not.
They
Okay.
do, and they're
not doing it.
They
That's
don't
fine.
want to.
Well, I
this
mean,
is, this
that's
is the
fine.
big secret,
Yeah.
right? Is that women don't want to do any of this dirty,
So-
dangerous, scary stuff. They don't want to.
Well, yeah, but is that just, you know, what we've been raised with, the culture
No.
we're surrounded by?
No, and I have data to back this up. So
Okay.
if you
Oh, is there more, Nick? Just let it play.
yeah, we'll just let it play. So back around the time of suffrage, we're talking like 1850s to 1920, roughly around there when the big suffrage movement was happening. Did you guys know that most women were completely against it? by all of the referendums that they would do where they would let women vote on whether they wanted to vote, only about 4% actually had any interest in voting. And they actually had really good reasons for this. There was much higher membership in anti-suffrage groups than pro-suffrage groups, and these groups would do public debates, they would do written debates, newspaper periodicals where they would go back and forth and debate these things. And the women who were against suffrage said, look, the primary purpose of government is to protect persons and property, okay? Why task women with that when we're not really capable of doing that, okay? We don't want to have to be drafted. We don't want to have to do jury duty. We don't want to have to be a political bloc, because back then women had advocacy groups for things they wanted, but they weren't a lobbying group. They didn't have like voting rights, so they weren't able to be as easily politicized. They felt like they had a moral high ground to ask for things like, we need more parks, we need better schools, we need clean air, whatever it was. And that if they became just another voting bloc, they would be involved in dirty politics, and they didn't want to do that. They felt like somebody has to be morally neutral and not involved in politics. So, given all of that, do you guys think that women can protect and defend persons and property?
Sure.
Yep.
I mean, well, first of all, I want to go back to the fact that for a long time, women weren't allowed to own property, or at least not without being married. And so...
Actually, it was the opposite. It was once you got married, you generally, whatever belonged to you belonged to your
Sure,
husband,
but
so you
then
couldn't
usually the woman is still living with the family.
Right,
And
but why would you... So think about
Yeah.
why.
Why would you wanna live on your own?
Why do you think women didn't own property?
Well,
do you think it was just the patriarchy, like just
No, I'm
hated
not
the
saying
women
that.
and
I'm
they
not
just
saying
wanted
that.
to put their boot on their neck and keep them down?
I
or-
generally don't think that.
Okay, what do you think?
I generally think it was just a matter of the times. Like, you know, because it was, I mean...
So do you think there was a reason, though? Do you think there was a logic behind not letting
I think it
women own
worked for
property?
back then. I think it worked for what it is at that point in time.
No, I don't think you understand what I'm
Sure.
saying. So
Okay.
if you're a woman
Yeah.
and you own land and it's 1802,
Mm-hmm.
and bandits or cattle robbers or Indians come and they say, we're taking your land,
Yeah.
what are you going to do about it?
But that's exactly my point. That worked for that time.
Okay, what's different now?
We don't have that as much. I mean, it depends on the neighborhood, of course. I mean, it depends on the community,
Okay,
et
so
cetera.
if you own land now in 2024 and you have a squatter who comes and squats on your property and you need them removed,
I did
do
that.
Do you call ladies to come and physically remove them, or are there men who come and physically remove them?
So I had a subleaser who I needed to get rid of, and I did all of it. My landlord didn't do anything.
Okay, what'd you do?
I went to the court, and
Okay.
I got the papers. I took her to court. I won.
Oh, wait, as a woman squatter?
Yeah.
Oh. Well, okay, but did you physically remove her, or did cops come?
Well, did she willingly, after the judgment from the court, she willingly left?
So, okay, the lease was up. She refused to leave. And, so, you know, I got the paperwork. I gave her the 3-day notice to vacate, which is the proper way to...
Right, you're going through the eviction process.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so then, you know, and she was still like, that's not right. It's totally illegal, even though I got it literally from the courthouse. And so then we're like, okay, let's get the proper eviction papers. Mind you, we still had the papers escorted by cops.
So did you both went to the court and there was like the eviction trial?
Yeah, and we did.
Okay.
Well, I mean, not the eviction trial.
So then-
So she did leave within the 5 days of receiving the eviction.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But, so let's say she stayed there, right?
Yeah.
Because I think this is what Rachel is getting at. Let's say she stayed there, you even won the eviction case,
Yeah.
the judge did an order, I don't know, typically after the eviction, I think they have another period of time, it depends on the state.
Yeah.
It can be 10 days, 30 days, whatever it is. And then the cops will come after a certain period of time and then forcibly remove the person. I think what Rachel's trying to get at is
Right.
who's going to forcibly remove the person, whether man or woman, if they were, even after getting a judgment from a court, they still refuse to leave.
Right. Okay. So in this case, because she left within the 5 days, I didn't have to have like the sheriff remove her.
Right.
But I mean, at least when I was giving the papers, the cops that were there were men and women. Yes, primarily men, but there were women. I mean,
Right,
who's to say
but-
there can't be more?
Well, you're talking about a process server? So you served her with the...
So it was my mother who served her, but because of the threats she was making, we had her escorted by foot patrol.
And that was not like a bunch of strong, independent women who marched.
It
her
was
out
a
of
man
there.
and a woman.
Okay. And if it had just been a woman, do you see what I'm getting at? Do you see, like, who defends our national borders? Not a bunch of feminists, right? The use of force is still always going to be men.
I mean, of course,
like when you come
men
down
are
to
taller and bigger. Of course,
Yeah.
they're gonna have
Now
that
you're getting it.
physical. Well, I always got it. I always
Right.
understood.
Right.
I mean, going back to the sports things. I mean, the men are gonna be able to do things that women just physically
Right.
can't. But
So when we talk about equality, the only equality women have is the illusion of equality granted to them and provided for them by men.
sure. I mean, that's why I think it depends on the context when it comes to equality. Personally,
If you have to appeal to men and say, men, let us be equal. We demand equality. And the men go, fine, we'll enforce equality. Is that really equality?
well, that's why I think it depends on how it is being handled. Personally, I think
So it's up to the men, basically. It's always going to when you get
because
down
they're
to it,
already
you have
in
the
that
men.
position. If we could flip it, and then they'd have to ask us, right? I mean,
Okay. So you think we could put women on all the oil rigs, and we could put women in the Senate, we could put women in the military as generals, we could make them sheriffs, and that would work out fine?
yeah.
You think so? Okay.
I mean, well, here's the thing. I mean, okay. For example, I remember watching this one show. I think it was called Stars and Stripes, and it took a bunch of celebrities and put them in the position of military. It had men, it had women. The person who ended up winning was the skier Peekaboo Streets, and she was a woman. She beat out actually Sarah Palin.
That guy.
She ended up beating out like Sarah Palin's husband, and
this is a reality
Wait,
show.
where's this where is this going?
well, for example, she ended up winning. She was in, but they were all put in position of military, and she ended up winning. It was a woman.
So do you think that men and women are the same?
I don't think they're the same. I don't. I think physically there are differences.
Okay. Just physically though, like you don't think that men have certain strengths and women have certain strengths, and they each have like different divinely appointed roles in existence?
Well, I mean, I'm an atheist personally.
Okay. Do you think that they have appointed roles in society in order for society to be mostly successful?
I think that's how it's come to be.
So can I ask you another question?
Yeah.
Do you think that women are happier today, or do you think that they were happier before all of this stuff?
I
That's a good
think
question.
Because it's proven that women
Well-
are way less happier today.
okay, but is that just the stats we're looking at now? As in, like, those are the stats we're taking?
That's just ignorance is bliss.
Yeah, because I mean, for example, like people like to make the argument that we're seeing a rise in autism. Okay, is it the fact that there's a rise in autism, or did we just not take into account the fact that we didn't know what it was before?
Well, so
Well, I think people know
I
what
can
happiness
actually
was.
explain this because it's like my area of specialty.
Sure.
There's surveys that were done, like very large scale surveys that were done in the 70s, and then again in the 90s, and then again in the early 2000s. So the first one that came out was called The Paradox of Female Happiness, where when they surveyed women all over the West and asked them if they were what their satisfaction levels were, a ton of different metrics were used. In the 70s, pretty good, pretty happy, not a lot wrong. By the time we get to the 90s and they repeat the survey, women are declining in happiness in the places that they have the most freedom, the most egalitarian society. So the places where women have the most equality are the places where we see them not only reporting that they have higher levels of unhappiness, but also we see a rise in alcoholism, fetal alcohol syndrome, depression, anxiety, prescription drug use. Every metric they look at, women are reporting that they are less happy. Now, there's a lot of reasons we could talk about why that might be.
Sure.
But I think people don't understand that when women are trying to be equal, it makes life pretty impossible. You end up thinking you can have it all, do it all, be it all. Your expectations are wildly high, and you expect that you're going to be able to have a husband and a family and a career and do whatever you want, but also have a man who's going to take care of stuff. And these things all contradict each other. These things do not mesh together well. On top of that, women are more emotionally volatile. We have a hormonal cycle every month that fluctuates. We have pre-menopause, we have postpartum, you know, we have a lot of ups and downs
Okay,
that men
and
don't have.
why does that make us more emotional? Because and I'm genuinely asking.
The literal hormone
Well,
in your
hold
body.
on. I know. But I mean, for example, let's look at like history here. So much war has been caused by men.
Well, I have something for this actually.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they looked at monarchs, for example, kings and queens, and they actually found that queens were just as or even more likely to wage war than kings.
Oh, I'm not disagreeing. I think there's some real messed up women in history too, truly.
No, but they did like an analysis here. I'm not just saying there were some queens. They just comparing all of the. I don't know if it was the English monarchs, the British monarchs. I don't recall exactly the specific
Sure.
details of this analysis they did, but they did find that queens were more likely to wage war than kings.
Okay.
Just wanted to put that in there.
Sure. I mean, are we looking at it statistically as in, I mean, let's be real, there were probably still more kings in history than there were ever like queens that were
But it's
really
per-
in
it's
charge.
per capita,
Okay, so
right?
it is per capita.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I can't speak to that personally.
So
but-
why would we think that men are going to start more war if women are more emotionally
Well-
volatile and less rational and less logical on average?
Well, maybe
than
we'd
men
know
are?
that if we were taught more about those women as well. Because I mean, personally, I'm just gonna be honest with you. I mean, how many women in history can we actually name?
A ton.
Well, I mean, talking in that specific position to cause a war.
I mean, I'm an Orthodox Christian, and we have
Yeah.
tons of different queens and princesses and women who
Sure.
were in various leadership positions and
Sure,
waged
but I mean-
horrific war on their enemies and
Sure,
things like that.
it's
so.
it's just usually we see, queens that are just with a king. Yes. Oh,
You're getting
Sorry,
a little
sorry.
Well,
cut
that,
off.
that would be, I could give you that, except that in the modern age, we have a whole bunch more data that proves that this is not the case.
Okay.
For example, when you look at juvenile correction facilities or women's prisons, so we were just talking about how men have the monopoly on force.
Yeah.
So men in male prisons, things like that. Generally, men grow up using physical force. And when they're little, they do rough and tumble play with their dad, with their siblings, with their friends, and they kind of learn where the boundaries are of like, how much can I beat up my friend before I go too far and actually cause harm? So they tend to learn that young, and it has an impact. Women don't have those same experiences. So what we see is that when women do have the monopoly on force, for instance, when you are a female guard in a juvenile facility or a female guard in a women's prison, the women guards are far more likely to be abusive, and the abuse tends to be worse than men. And
I have heard that.
They do think it's partially because of our emotional volatility, our hormonal fluctuations, and also just because women tend to be more likely to be on prescription psychiatric medications, have mental illnesses, and just be less used to knowing where the boundary is. So when women lose their shit and get physical, they tend to escalate to a point that's a lot
Okay.
worse than what a man
Can I
would
ask
do.
then, is some of this maybe because, also we hear a lot that women don't get the resources they need in the medical field?
You mean like mental health wise?
I'm not talking necessarily mental health. Like for me personally, it took years to get diagnosed with a chronic illness.
Okay.
And there's a lot of that. And there's also not as much like research on women in medicine. Again, going back to autism.
How does that relate to like the
Well,
violence?
I think I kind of know what you're talking about a little bit. I'd like to offer up a bit of a rebuttal.
Okay.
So I think you're talking perhaps about how there's less testing of certain drugs
Yeah, so
on
I mean-
women, or like less things are tested on women. My rebuttal, though, there would be, well, one thing that's a concern is if you're testing an experimental drug on somebody, if the woman happens to be pregnant but she doesn't know it, there could be ramifications there when it comes, because, for example, some medications are not recommended if you're pregnant, for example. So if you're testing something experimental, the woman doesn't know she's pregnant, obviously it could be very rare that, she's happened to be partaking in a trial and, she's pregnant. That could be one of the justifications for why they're more inclined to test things on men. There's also like this component of, well, women, when women's hormones tend to shift a bit more throughout their cycle. So I think it's better to test on someone who has their hormones are a bit
and
more
I
level.
get the
But the other
stability.
thing is, it's not clear to me if it's some privilege to
Yes,
have
not have to be tested on.
have like experimental drugs
Yeah, it's
tested on you. That seems like it would be a negative, like men are so desperate for money and resources that they're willing to have experimental drugs tested on them. I think if it was actually the reverse, if it was 100% women where we were testing drugs on them, there would be a huge outcry from feminists saying, wait, why are we like subjugating women specifically to this drug treatment? That seems like
I get what you're saying. I mean, I personally wouldn't be opposed to that.
Okay.
But
if it was 100% women,
yeah, I honestly think it's kind of necessary because
sure, but I feel like feminists would just argue and be like, wait, hold on, this is like, look at how this is unfair.
This
like,
isn't
why
equal.
are women?
You're not
going
gonna hear that from me personally.
Okay.
But
all right, well, that's fine.
No, I mean, for example, this is a more minor thing, but like, okay, why has recently when they test like tampons or pads, it's only now they're using real menstrual blood rather than like water or
But how does
it's different.
I just wonder how this gets back to what we were debating, which was why
Well, okay,
can women defend persons and property?
Yeah, to tie back to that.
If a hurricane takes out half the eastern seaboard, are the women going to get out there and get the power lines back up and put the sandbags out and rescue people from the floodwaters and rebuild everything?
I mean, I would certainly hope so.
No, they can't. They can't do it. They can't do it.
Ben George donated $200.
Yo, thank you, Ben. Appreciate it, man.
So you claimed men are more dangerous and advocate for women, yet want examples of powerful women abusing power?
No.
Use Google image search for teacher arrested for essay. 90% are images of women in power.
I agree. I agree. I mean,
There's definitely a lot of that. A couple quick things.
Yeah.
Rachel, you were talking about like how aggression tends to manifest, especially young boys, for example. I don't know if you're kind of familiar with this, like how men's aggression, especially at an early age, tends to manifest itself more in the physical realm.
Yeah.
But isn't it the case that women's aggression will manifest? It might not manifest itself in the physical realm, but it will still manifest itself regardless. Reputation destruction.
Yeah,
for example.
women use subterfuge, manipulation, gossip, that sort of thing, because, right, if you can't use physical force to get your way, those are the things you're going to
that's
default
true.
to. So.
I mean, that's something we